Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Malvern Books, for inviting me. Welcome to the real world hidden from the real world. Welcome to the Trilogy of Light. The trilogy is not religious, nor is it an intellectual construct. The trilogy, 3 novels, dares to give voice to forbidden insights. Here's a sample summary of the 3 books. The Secret of the Bermuda Triangle, this was published first. The summary, here hides the secret for how to live on planet Earth. You did not discover that in New Mexico, because I wrote it here, you see. We're kind of sharing insight. So here's the secret for how to live on planet Earth. Sharing a Man. No, it's not a dirty book. And if anybody here wishes it were, I offer no apologies. The summary, beauty. Notice I did not say beautiful. Next Stop, Heaven. This is the 3rd final volume of the trilogy. The summary, the light always breaks up the darkness. I want to read one paragraph from my notes just so that I make sure I get it right. When I wrote the manuscripts for these 3 novels, I wasn't thinking trilogy. I didn't realize I had written a trilogy until after I had published the 2nd novel, Sharing a Man. It was still later that I realized I had written the Trilogy of Light. Notice I said the trilogy. I can speak with authority about these books because they are not ego-invested. I can speak with authority because back in 2011, the philosopher King introduced himself to me as me. This philosopher King tethers to Plato, one of the ancient writers upon whom our civilization is built. The decline in our civilization makes the Trilogy of Light timely. Have you ever thought we live on a forbidden planet? Consider the evening news. It's a torrent of negativity. Good, happy, wholesome images, forbidden. This notion of a forbidden planet is explored briefly at the opening to Next Stop, Heaven. A note from the author, that's me. We live on a forbidden planet. We are forbidden to bring out our inner light. In every era, men and women rebel against the invisible power that blocks their light. Time and time again, the rebellion fails. The good die young has become the mantra of the oppressed. In the United States, depression has become the ruling mental illness. It seems we have lost the fight. It seems we have exhausted all our resources for defeating an enemy we can't even see. Is there no future in light? Must we always live in a world of darkness? The story you are about to read answers these questions and more. Here you will find new contemplations of darkness and light. These contemplations are not mine, they are yours. Next Stop, Heaven is your own journey in light. The 3 books build a refuge in which you can connect to your own insights. This is not how you're supposed to write a novel. These are books I feel are more than novels, but if you write a novel, you need to be in control. You have to wow the reader with your style. You have to wow them with maybe some characterization, quirky people, a plot, a twist at the end. You know, there's a lot of ways to manipulate how people relate to literature. There's characterization in these books, there's plot, but there's no intention to wow anybody with the language. The language is a vehicle to convey a spirit that infuses the works and I don't even want to begin to try to explain it. Jan had a similar experience. Those of us who have that do not usually end up in the spotlight. The spotlight for novelists usually is people who have big personalities, where you look at the book and the name of the author is this big and the title is really small down here. So we're not dealing with that here. So we're building a refuge in which you can connect to your own insights. The Secret of the Bermuda Triangle. One of the virtues of this book is it explores how to build a life. It's all about building and rebuilding. And Troy, there's a subtitle here, The Adventures of Troy is told by him. He's 20 years old when he writes the story. It starts when he's 18. It takes place in the Bermuda Triangle, 1946 and 1948. So I have something here that Troy is writing. This is how he's building or rebuilding his life. My darling, my love, I float on a sea of darkness. I am adrift in a sea of broken words. They are broken in spirit. They are broken because I am broken. Every day the drug breaks me. Are my words strong enough to carry the story? You know part of the story, but not this part. This is how it all began. Back then, floating on the sea, I survived without words, but that is not possible now. The word keeps me alive. I struggle for sentences. The fancy ones elude me. So I write, I am statements. I am adrift. I am broken. I am writing the story that keeps me alive. In Sharing a Man, two women are at each other's throats over love for a man. The story builds as the women rebuild their life. Here's how Anne Somerset does some rebuilding of her life. And Robert is not in the room. I do not understand this friend of yours, Robert, and I do not want to. I am sorry. It is you and your poetry. That is all I ever wanted. I am thinking I should have shared an idea I have for a painting. I have never shared ideas with you before. The paintings always spoke for themselves, but now I will not be able to share any more paintings, the ones to come. And I think it is fine to break the rule of not sharing an idea with you, even though I sense the break will break more than I expect. Is life living from expectation to expectation? No, I wish to live beyond that. And I did live beyond that when you were near. You are near, Robert. I know this to be true. This truth shall appear in my next painting. There's a lot of building and rebuilding in Next Stop Heaven. This takes place in Austin. Maybe you can see that there's a street sign here, 6th Street in San Jacinto. There's a photograph that covers the whole cover. I took this photo. That in itself is an interesting story, how that happened. I won't have time to get into that, but you got the Frost Tower here. You all know about that, so that's proof that we're in Austin. So here's a sample of how Lena, she's one of the people in the story. Notice I said people, not character. It's near the end, but it's not a spoiler. It's one of the mysteries of the book. You can read stuff at the end that doesn't spoil the story. I'm just going to skip part of this scene so I can get through the whole thing here. Lena walked the sidewalk of 6th Street in joy. A feeling came over her that she ruled the world. She walked with this new feeling for a while, but soon her mind chided her heart for its folly. The heart sought to sustain the feeling despite repeated objections from the mind. This feeling of yours, the mind said, doesn't even register on the chart of logic. What does logic have to do with it, the heart said with a humph. You live in a fantasy, said the mind. Lena settled the dispute by adopting the view that she had the potential to rule her own private world. That's a basic duty, she affirmed. But her heart insisted she was to rule the entire world. Forget fantasy, the mind said. The world, said the heart. Fantasy, world. In a manner fitting the woman of light, Lena Lovett, sculptor, scribe, accepted the world. Lena walked her bliss and presently came to a restaurant with a fenced-in outdoor patio. There a punk-dressed man stood on the sidewalk and appeared to be in a heated exchange with a man seated at a table with a woman. Lena didn't pay the men much mind until the seated man leaped over the short metal fence and fell to the sidewalk with the other man. A quick flurry of punches from both men brought no resolution to the dispute. The punk broke free from the clutch and rose to his feet. He kicked the other man in the face. Onlookers cried foul. The injured man collapsed. His body slumped over the curb into the street. A car stopped with a squeal of brakes. By now, the woman from the table had straddled and come over the fence. She pushed the punk from his backside. He turned and glared at her. "Get out of here, you animal," she screamed. The punk-dressed man locked gazes with the woman. He pointed a finger at her. "Your man is weak. Only the strong survive in the jungle." "Take your jungle someplace else," the woman said. Onlookers cheered. The punk took a few sideways steps between the fallen man and the woman. He kept his eyes fixed on her. Then he turned about and strutted off. People moved out of his way. Lena, who stood in the middle of the sidewalk, remained where she was. She had a chance to step aside and let the man pass, but something made her stand her ground. The punk approached Lena and stopped in front of her. Lena guessed him to be in his late 30s, but she couldn't be sure with the stubble of beard and all that grime on his face. "What the hell am I doing?" she said to herself. "What do you want?" snarled the man. "Would it make any difference if I told you?" The man glanced at Lena's hair. "I like your hair. You and me, we could make it." "I'll make nothing with you except a peace." The punk grinned. Black holes gaped where teeth should be. "There's no peace in the jungle," he said. "Depends on the jungle," Lena said. The man grunted. "You're not afraid of me. Don't you know I could crush you on the spot?" "That doesn't make me afraid of you." Lena looked death straight in the eye. If Dominion had a look, that was the look Lena gave. Her dominion excluded the presence, the very existence of bestiality. The punk blinked. He stepped around her without saying a word. Lena's head recoiled. The only sound she heard on the busy street was the clunk of the man's hard-heeled boots striking the sidewalk. I mentioned earlier about there's a spirit that infuses these books. And it speaks in many ways. Here's a way, but it won't be a way until I tell you a story. First let me read what will be the setup for this. And I'm going to be extracting some text to focus on an object. Returned with a round silver tray upon which she carried 2 glasses of ice water and 2 small plates of chocolate chip cookies. She set the tray on the coffee table near a bowl of violets. Without saying a word, Elizabeth set aside her plate, still laden with the one cookie, and rose from the sofa. David followed her movements to the credenza. There she fetched a record album from inside. On the cover, 4 men in single file walked across the street. The turntable sat on top of the receiver, which in turn sat on the credenza. Elizabeth pushed a button on the receiver. A red light came on. She pulled the vinyl record from its jacket and set it on the platter. Elizabeth's body blocked her move of the stylus onto the record. David heard a pop through the 2 floor speakers that flanked the credenza. A light musical melody left the speakers. Then these words: "Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. And I say, it's all right." Before the Beatles sang more, Elizabeth picked up the plane arm and set it on its post. She walked to the French doors and there stood still, her back to David. She sang, "Here comes the sun, here comes the sun, and I say, it's all right." The clear lyric tone of her voice, more than the words themselves, sent a chill through David. Elizabeth turned and faced David. He had just swallowed the last bite of his first cookie. "We take what we need and work with that," she said. "It can be a verse from a song, a page from a novel, a scene in a painting. Do you have a favorite painting that inspires you?" David set his plate of 2 remaining cookies on the coffee table. The plate clicked against the bowl of violets. Somewhere on this planet is a woman who has already acquired or will acquire this book, Next Stop Heaven. And while she's reading it, like you would read it, she'll have takeaways. And then when she gets to the end, she'll have more takeaways. And then she will file it with the other books that she owns in her personal library. Some time will pass. It might be a month, a year, could be a decade. And she will be at a party, intimate gathering, and these people will be seated around a coffee table. And everybody will be holding a small plate with hors d'oeuvres, the size of the plate, similar to the plate that Elizabeth handed David with the chocolate chip cookies. At some point, somebody will put their plate on the coffee table, and they will give it a push, and it will click against a bowl of flowers. It might be violets. So the woman who owns this book, of course everybody in the room already owns the book, but we'll pretend they don't. So the woman who owns this book, she'll hear more than the click. She won't be thinking of this book. She won't be thinking of pages 117 and 119 I just read excerpts from. She will feel the spirit that infuses these works, this book and the other 2 works. And it will rush upon her, and in an instant, she will be transformed. It's a little story from the future. Each of these books is a standalone story. Each book has unique people and settings. Each book explores different themes. And they all share common ground in sharing one theme in particular. We all have genius, inner light, but we seldom bring it out in creative acts because we have been bludgeoned into conformity. This is what ties all 3 books together. If you're thinking that you've never been bludgeoned into conformity, you have. The most insidious bludgeoning occurs through the operation of isms. Isms are intellectual constructs that seek to contain your heart and your mind. All of us in this room have been bludgeoned by capitalism and intellectualism and messianism. The list is long. A side benefit of reading Sharing a Man is that it breaks up the bonds of messianism. We need to discard this notion that we must wait and wait and wait for a Savior or liberator. We can be our own hero. So instead of waiting, we could say, I no longer am going to be a slave. I'm no longer going to be a slave to messianism. I'm no longer going to be a slave to anyism. I am the hero. This is totally contrary to the Aristotelian model that dictates to every author on this planet that you have to have a solitary hero and somebody who rises to extraordinary power. You know, the ancient texts, you always had somebody like the king. He's stripped away from his family. He has to go on a voyage. He has to kill monsters and gain some sort of big prize and bring it home. These books champion everybody as the hero. The secret of the Bermuda Triangle is, among other things, the antidote for capitalism and savagery. More about that in a moment. Next stop, heaven, the antidote for intellectualism. And you don't need to read all 344 pages to get that message. I want to say something else here about the secret of the Bermuda Triangle, then I'll close with this. This is a healing book. It's a healing book, at least for me. It might be for you. The other two books, I haven't yet had an experience with them that I can say I've actually had a healing experience in reading the book or reading parts of the book. I'll just tell you one example. I was in my office at my desk, which is in my living room. Talk about small quarters, Jan. I mean, I got everything in the living room. And so over about a 2-day period, a savage attack was developing, and it was coming at me, just literally crushing me. And it was threatening to stop my work. In fact, it did, because I left my desk. And I'm in my small living room, and I'm standing by a small pedestal table that had these two books on it. Next Stop, Heaven hadn't been published yet. And I asked a question: what do I need to do? This is one of the secrets of life I've learned. We always say we want answers, but we never ask the questions. So, what do I need to do? And my gaze fell on this book about that time, and a message came to me: pick up the book and start reading. And I was reluctant to just start at the front. I thought that'd be too academic. So the thought that came to me gave me a reprieve and says, anywhere you want. So I just opened up at random and I started to read. Maybe I found a familiar passage. I thought, well, I kind of skimmed through that. And so I'm going through all this, and I don't know how many pages I read. I don't know how long I read them. But I do know this, that when I finished, the attack was obliterated. I had two similar attacks later, more recently, and they were similarly obliterated. Like I said, this book is the antidote for savagery. How many of you have an antidote for savagery in your home? I mean, this is it. This is your antidote. So, there's one more thing I need to say about this. If you came here to buy just one copy, one book of the trilogy, you don't know at this point which one, I would suggest this is the book. And there's a serendipitous flaw in this, courtesy of the printing company. Now this, I'm holding here a digital book. The ones that I brought are what I call the first art edition. I only have a few hundred copies. Once they're gone, they'll never ever be published again. So the art edition is an offset book that is ink on paper. This is toner, this is digital, toner on paper. But on the cover, when you were holding the book and you're reading it, and I don't know if it's due to oil from the hand or what it is, but you'll start to see some sparkles. back cover and along the edges of the spine. You probably won't see anything on the front cover. And what's happening is that minute parts of the matte finish are flaking off. And the sparkles is the light hitting the layer of glue underneath. So the serendipity here is that you can smile while you see the sparkles every time you pick up the book, because it means that you're taking your own journey in life. So that's the introduction. We have a small crowd here. Nevertheless, people have questions. Not that you have to ask them now, but does anybody have a question? What is your question?
Did you set out to do a trilogy?
No. No, I wrote the manuscripts in about a 5-year period. And after I published this book, the second book, I was talking with some friends poolside, and the wife of the couple, she bought the book, and we were chatting, and something came to me about something common between these 3 books, which I'm not going to share with anybody. I want that to be discovered by readers. But it's something about the books that just came to me and said, whoa, this is a trilogy. But I didn't know it was a trilogy in terms of light. That came later.
Do you have the same characters in all?
No, they're all unique. I said this is beauty, not beautiful. Did that get anybody's, saying, what is he talking about? This is something that is hard to explain, because we live in a world where everything is defined by the 5 physical senses. If the 5 physical senses can pay testimony to anything, then we call it real. And if it's outside, you mentioned that in your I think it was your preface to your book. If it's outside the 5 physical senses, then you're in a whole different domain. But a lot of people don't know how to go there because they've been bludgeoned into conformity to engage the world going through the 5 physical senses. So I'm gonna try to make this short. I'm gonna read something here to launch this. This is a quote. Theater goers and sightseers are devoted to beautiful sounds and colors and shapes and to works of art which consist of these elements, but their minds are constitutionally incapable of seeing and devoting themselves to beauty itself. Now, this is in translation, and the author is Plato, who wrote Republic 2,300 years ago. And what he wrote and what other people wrote before him, Socrates before him, and writers that came after, their writings underlie our civilization, whether or not we pay tribute to it or not. It is we live on a mythology. So the way I looked at this is, okay, we have the 5 physical senses that give us the absolute testimony to reality. So let's say we're looking at this lamp here, and we have a group of people, and they all say, this is beautiful. And somebody joins the group and says, I don't think it's beautiful. Well, wait a second, how is that possible? We all have the same senses. We know this is beautiful. Well, the one person has his engagement with an object has moved from taste, that is physical taste in the mouth, to taste that's of the spirit. We talk about having taste in clothes, taste in if you're furnishing a house. So that's the taste that we all relate to, but it's not absolute. So the one person who says it's not beautiful, he or she has moved from one of the physical senses into this unknown area where things are subjective. So when somebody gets to the point where all 5 physical senses have been translated into this unknown, then you're on the path to meet beauty. That's the only way I can explain it. I hope that works. I like it. You were saying earlier in your comments, it's even hard to come up with words to explain what's happening. So if you want to just read these as books, this is an adventure novel. It was the finalist at the Indie Book Awards. It was a winner at the Texas Association of Authors Awards. So this is good. You say, okay, it's an adventure. And Sharing a Man was also a finalist at the Indie Book Awards and was a winner at the Texas Association of Authors. And this could be how 2 women are in conflict over love for a man, and how is this resolved, or is it resolved? Next up, Heaven. Too soon to say if it's going to win any awards. If it wins none, I think that will be a tell for what's going on here. But the theme that I think about is the light always breaks up the darkness. So that's it for me. I thank you all for showing up. If anybody wants to buy books by Jan or me, we'll be here to sign them for you.
Thank you.